Hello, hello. Good morning, evening, and afternoon, wherever you may be. Thank you so much for tuning in and being a part of Voice Uganda Radio this morning. I am your host, Miss Brenda, for the next 2 hours of Freedom at Hand here on Voice Uganda Radio. Let me send out a warm welcome to all of our members and all of those who participate from the UK and throughout Europe. You have always been a part of our listening audience, but we thank you so much for your participation. Margaret Opio is a great asset to the family here at Voice Uganda Radio. We are really blessed to have her on board. Her participation, her guests, her callers, and everything has just really been igniting a fire here, and we're really very excited. It's funny, most of us don't understand the language, but we do enjoy the program, we enjoy the show, and we enjoy being a part of her call-in and listening audience. So thank you so much, Margaret Opio, for a job well done. I have been talking a lot about having the Professor Mubiru here on the program. Most of you know him. He has his own show that comes on here on Voice Uganda Radio, Democratization in Uganda. A lot of what he has to share is very, very informative. I listen to him intently when his program is on. I never call in because the history and the legalities of what he shares, from the Constitution to the people to every aspect of it, I knew that it was going to be important for me to have him be a part of Freedom at Hand here on Sunday mornings. And I tell you why, because we talk a lot about going into the new Uganda, structuring that new Uganda, what that new Uganda will look like and what it will be. Margaret Opio just put it very beautifully, that the country is big enough for all of us, and it belongs to all Ugandans. Those who have been inside the country, who have gone through so many atrocities and so much heartache and struggle at the hands of this government, we need to start to give them a direction of where they can go, what will be available for them in the new Uganda, how we make them whole again, and how we move them forward. And that's what this hour is going to be about with the professor. Now, I said that this is going to be on 5 or 6 great topics, and Professor Mubiru and I decided that we cannot do justice to try to do all this in an hour. So the professor has agreed, and I am honored to have him. We're going to come back for the next 5 Sundays. He will be the guest on for the first hour, so that he really helps us to understand and give us the legal recourse of what we can do in Uganda to help the Ugandan people, and what is available for the people when we move in to that area. The second part of this program, my honored co-host will be on, and we will debate and talk more in length about some of the things that the professor has to share here this morning. So please, Professor, come in and say good morning to our audience, and say hello.
Good morning. I'm happy to be with you and to share any ideas that I may have, so we can go forward. And
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, and it is an honor. We appreciate you so much here for all that you do to educate us here at Voice Uganda Radio and the Ugandan people. Last week, when I had the chairs on for FUF, Freedom and Unity Front, and the Federal Alliance for Democracy and Development in Uganda, one of the things I talked about towards the end of the program is that Professor Otunu wrote an article about Uganda being very much like what happened in apartheid in South Africa, and how we have to liberate the people forward. Professor, we have talked numerous times about a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And what we want to do today as the first part of this series is we're going to talk about that more in length, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. We understand and we know in 1996 that the Archbishop Desmond Tutu there in South Africa chaired such a commission on behalf of the South African citizens. After the abolishing of apartheid, witnesses who were identified as victims of gross human rights violations were invited to give statements about their experiences, in which some of those statements turned into public hearings. So it was they understood and they knew that it was going to be very, very important to hear what the people had to say, because we're not in Uganda right now. Most of those of us that are living in the diaspora, we can hear stories, we can read about things, but we're not there. And I think a lot of what these truth commissions are going to bring out, we will be very, very surprised. So let's look at the first part of this, Professor, the Truth Commission. Why is it going to be important to set this up, to give a voice back to the Ugandan people? Let's start there first.
That's a very good question. What is the purpose of a Truth Commission? Well, the South African Act was called National Unity and Reconciliation Act. So that title of the act, it gives you an idea what it was all about. It was about uniting South Africans to make sure that the South Africans live under one nation and one government, as opposed to what happened before under apartheid. So the Truth Commission, and that's an important component of the act. The truth perspective is that the function of the commission is, the primary function is to fact finding, to find out by impartial investigators what happened and why it happened. And so there were extensive hearings in South Africa. They covered a wide spectrum of perspectives of life and politics in South Africa. And they, of course, wrote a 5-volume report, which we cannot recite here, but it gives you some idea. It included also an element of amnesty, as you know. Amnesty meaning that if you were involved in committing a crime that was politically motivated, then you could apply for amnesty and you would not be punished under the laws of South Africa. So I don't know whether you need any more introduction to that.
Yeah, and that part interests me, because when we talk about amnesty and we look at some of the things that have happened to a lot of the Ugandan people, let's start there. What rights do those who have caused these atrocities to the people in Uganda, under a Truth Commission looking at this, what rights will they have, or should we consider, or should we use what South Africa has done as a model as to how we go forward in this?
Under the South African Act, there was a section which had to do with reparation. The people who suffered, who bore the brunt of apartheid, were entitled to compensation for their suffering. And I think any attempt to deal with a situation like South Africa went through, for us in Uganda, we should also consider similar remedies. Those people whose lives have been destroyed, some people died, others were tortured and maimed, and all those people could claim reparations as a compensation for their suffering. So it's not limited to simply finding out the facts. As a matter of fact, that's the first step, this finding out the facts. But after you find out the facts, then you administer justice.
Yes. Now, before I go to compensation part and we talk a little more in length about some of the tortures and death that have happened, we know that we have a lot of Ugandans that live outside of the country, as well as those that are inside of the country. How do we move forward in the new Uganda in setting up our Truth Commission? Do we look for help from other countries to form this commission? Do we look for help within Uganda as well? Do we invite a lot of the religious organizations in? Because this one was headed up by one of the greatest religious icons there in South Africa. How do we go about setting up these boards? And should it all be within, or should we rely on other countries as well to set up the commission?
There are two parts to your question. How do you set up a Truth and Reconciliation Commission? Well, first of all, you have to consider the political environment existing at the time you are talking about the setting up the commission. In South Africa, Mandela was released in 1990, and then a new constitution, transitional constitution, was set up in 1993, and the Commission Act was enacted in 1995. What was happening was, from a political perspective, the ANC and all the other parties which had been fighting apartheid were in the same government, and it was a transitional government. So they made the decision together to form this reconciliation, unity and reconciliation commission. Now, the situation in Uganda is slightly different. We have a regime which is violating human rights in Uganda right now under NRM. You cannot do the same thing that happened in South Africa. You cannot set up a base in exile and set up, appoint a Truth and Reconciliation Commission to inquire what is going on in Uganda. So the scenario varies. In, for example, in Chile, what happened? The regime fell, but Pinochet was in the army, was still the commander of the army. So he influenced to some extent what was going on. So the politics varies. In the case of Uganda, I cannot conceive the setting up of a Truth and Reconciliation Commission while NRM is in full control of the political process. So we have to assume that NRM will be defeated in one way or another, and after that, then there will be the Ugandans will convene, maybe a convention, maybe a conference, and of interested parties, and then decide what to do. But the first item on the agenda, in my opinion, should be to set up this Truth and Reconciliation Commission.
Okay, because what I understand you saying is we know the corruption, we know the depths of everything there in Uganda. With the regime, with everything in place as it is right now in Uganda, we cannot work with any of that. We have to come in with a clean slate in order to really and truly have a Truth Commission where we're listening to the people and not being influenced by other entities within?
That is right. As I pointed out, South Africa was operating under different circumstances because they had a transitional government which consisted of all the parties. That is, the members from apartheid regime and the members from ANC and the Pan-African Congress, and these people were working together to set up the commission. But as I pointed out, every political scenario is different, and you have to imagine Uganda today. I cannot conceive the regime in power accepting the setting up of a truth commission to investigate them when they are still apparently in control of the political situation and the war process.
Mm-hmm.
That's part of our problem.
Yeah. So really, from what I hear you saying, as we have organizations outside of the country right now starting to unite to bring about a bigger force in moving us forward into a new Uganda, this is a positive thing then, and something that could work in behalf of helping to liberate and move us a little bit farther once the new Uganda is formed.
Exactly. The situation, the way it is today, first of all, maybe let me back up a little bit and point out that when you look at the political situation in Uganda, you have people, the Ugandans within Uganda, who are apathetic, who have pathological fear of the state, because very often they bring out the so-called Mamba, these ironically vehicles bought from South Africa, which intimidate people, which spray dye on demonstrators, and as long as those situations exist, the people are really held hostage. They cannot liberate themselves, so they are going to depend much on some of us who are outside. And so the other aspect is the mobilization of the people within the country. The demographics against of Uganda is such that most of the people live in the rural areas, and therefore the so-called spring of the Middle East is not likely to happen. The spring of the Middle East means that for example, in Tunisia and Egypt, people came to the city and camped in the middle of the city until the regime collapsed. That situation is very unlikely to happen in Uganda. So we have big problems. Nevertheless, I'm not saying that people should give up, because we are determined, and if history is to be our teacher, we certainly will eventually win.
Well, definitely history has to become our teacher. One of the things I hear you saying very loud and clear, which I've heard through other people outside as well, this regime change is going to have to start outside the country and move forward into the country. Because under the conditions that you just explained, it would be very, very difficult for the people to continue to put themselves in harm's way, because in Uganda, to put yourself in harm's way is really literally what it means. Would I be correct in saying that?
Yeah, you are very, very correct in saying that. And in addition, let me add one other factor of corruption. In Uganda, Uganda is one of the most corrupt countries in the world today. And under these situations, you have what you may call partners in crime. People who have become so wealthy through criminal and corrupt practices that they view regime change as a total loss, zero-sum game. So they are going to resist, and they are going to fight tooth and nail until, of course, we overcome them.
So we're not just fighting President Musoke, we're fighting all of those who have linked themselves to him in a way that is corruption.
Exactly.
So our fight is not just with the president, it's with the entire government, it seems.
It's what I call the partners in crime. And, I choose that phrase advisedly because any criminal syndicate, they participate in crime knowing that they are going to benefit out of it. However, when the situation gets tough, some of them break away and some of them abandon. No criminal partners are bonded forever. So depending on how we approach this situation, these partners will eventually realize that it is in their self-interest to abandon the sinking ship.
Mm-hmm. Now, is this possible? Is this something that can be set up and something that can be done? Because a lot of what we've been talking about, it casts a shadow on it, but we want people to understand the logistics of what we're having to deal with here. But a Truth and Reconciliation Council is possible in the new Uganda, and it is something that you feel we can move forward with once a regime change happens in Uganda.
Oh, sure, yes, and it should happen. And let me give you the reasons why we need a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Well, first I pointed out that the primary function of a Truth Commission is fact-finding. Impartial people must investigate the situation, the politics, what took place, and tell us what the facts are. For example, the wars in the north and in Luwel, we don't know what exactly happened there and why it happened. These are not things we are privy to, but these are things we have to find out. There are facts there. The war in the north took for a long time, almost 20 years. I mean, what were they fighting with the ghostly soldiers and all that? So there are many things to look for. Secondly, of course, there are people. We have to realize that in situations like this, as is happening in Uganda and what happened in South Africa, these are crimes are politically motivated. They are different from ordinary crimes when people commit murder just for these are political crimes. They are committed with a political motive. So, and therefore they are much more difficult to investigate, and that's why you need specialized investigators to do that job effectively and fairly too. The secondary objective for a reconciliation and unity commission is to create unity between the former combatants. For example, if NRM is defeated, the people who defeat NRM will have somehow to deal with the situation whereby not everybody in NRM is an enemy or has committed atrocities, but some have contributed in different ways and to different degrees, and who is liable and who is not liable. So that has to be determined, and you need impartial people to deal with that situation. The situation in the north also is complicated. How do you deal with the Connie who abused children, married young girls like 10 years old, and enslaved them for years? He probably still has some of them. Now, that kind of a situation also is sensitive, and it needs somebody who is impartial looking in from outside to make sure that justice is done. Truth commissions also, learning from South Africa, contribute to nation building. In fact, they are designed for nation building. So South Africa would not be what it is today without that Truth Commission, which investigated what happened. And as a matter of fact, some people we are found guilty of having committed crimes. Some people were exonerated. Do you remember the name of General Magnus Malan? General Magnus Malan and 3 people from the Inkatha party were charged in 1996 because they could not qualify under the amnesty, but they were acquitted by the court. And so the situation can be both fluid and very, very, very tricky. So you need a truth commission that is impartial, probably consisting of people with integrity, including some from the international community.
Yeah. Now, when I hear you talk about nation building, I understand because as you went on in that, I saw how that worked. One of the things in a truth commission, when these commissions are set up and these decisions are made, it is not made on behalf of the government. They're made on behalf of the people, what makes the people whole, what builds the community and the country back up to help it move forward. Is that pretty much it?
Yes. Obviously, it's not the Truth Commission is for the people.
Yeah,
the people,
exactly.
The people
and I think that's
know what happened.
Exactly. And I think that's what we want as far as getting the people on board and helping them to understand. Truth commissions are set up not to protect the government, but to indeed protect the people. Because from what I hear you saying, the truth commissions is going to stretch over a large area because you got government, you have truth commissions that have to be set up for government, for the people, for military purposes, for organizations, for legal, for justice. I mean, it is a vast amount of information that spreads like a fire throughout all the areas in government or dealing with the people or dealing with making the people whole again.
Yes, learning from experience in South Africa and Chile and other countries, we don't have to set up many commissions to investigate different perspectives, military, prisons, violations of human rights. You can have the same commission with the departments dealing with the different aspects of the investigation. For example, I just mentioned corruption. Corruption is going to be part of the investigation that is going to be carried out. A lot of corruption has taken place, and that commission could have departments, the amnesty department, and a department investigating corruption. Another one could be looking into violations of human rights, crimes against humanity, either in the north or in the Luwero Triangle or anywhere in the western region. I understand there are mass graves there. Somebody has to find out who was responsible for that. So, yes, you can still have one commission, but with many departments investigating different perspectives of the criminal conduct.
Because a part of this, it's not going to just be to make the people in general whole, that will tell stories that no one else knows of, deaths, of torture, of different things that have happened to them. But even within the prisons, we know through information that we have obtained, we know that many prisoners that are in the, especially Luzila prison there, that a lot of the stories that come out of there, you have to wonder why these people have spent almost their entire lives in some of these prisons, and they've never had their day in court. No one's ever listened to their story other than a police officer who decided to throw them in there. And to this day, no one's still listening, or these trials don't even come forward to be heard all these years later to determine whether these people should still be incarcerated. Speak for a little bit on that, if you would, for me.
Yes, the issue you are raising is very important, and has several perspectives to it. One perspective is, for example, the administration of the prison itself. How is it administered? Is it administered in a normal, efficient way, or is the prison used like a dumping ground where people are sent to literally be tortured? I think Fadu put on your website an article by an American who was imprisoned, and he gave us a very harrowing story about what happened to him. He was put in a cell where there was, it had not been cleaned for probably years, and definitely that is a place where you go not to be punished, but to be infected by disease, and probably many people do get infected by disease. So all these situations have to be investigated. The Uganda Human Rights Commission has power to investigate this thing even before we go as far as setting up the Truth Commission. The Uganda Human Rights Commission has the power to visit prisons unannounced and find out what is going on. If the Human Rights Commission is not doing its job, then somebody else has to do it, and we have to do it through the Truth and the Reconciliation Commission.
Yeah, but it saddens me to hear you say that the prisons there are really like dumping grounds of torture. It's just really an unfortunate thing. We have a caller, Professor. We're going to go ahead and take this call, and then we'll continue with our conversation. Hey, caller, come on in, and welcome to Voice Uganda Radio.
Thank you so much, Ms. Brenda, and good morning, Professor Mubiru. I really thank you so much for the program. This program is very informative and is very, very enlightening. I would like to thank the previous program, excuse me, Miss Margaret Opio. She has done a wonderful job, and it seems she's getting larger and larger as far as the audience is concerned. We thank you, and Miss Margaret, thank you so much. Please do continue the good work you are doing. First of all, you are talking about Truth Reconciliation Commission to be put in place. We put an article on Fadu website, and those who are not familiar with the website, the address is www.fadu.org. That's F like a Fred, UDDU.org. And once you are there, click on Information Center. You will read a lot of articles, especially the one we just put out regarding the tortures, the killings of Acholis and other northern people in northern Uganda. Very, very, very sad indeed. When Museveni came to power early in 1986-87, Museveni, because he was popular and he wanted to please the people of Uganda, he set up that type of commission, the inquiry, to inquire about the atrocities and disappearance and killing of people Ugandans during Mini's regime. Unfortunately, Museveni was the one who was doing all this torturing, all this kidnapping, all this killing, throwing hand grenades to make Uganda ungovernable, and that's not a step with it. very, very much known. And you had some of his top officers say that we can make Museveni, Uganda ungovernable, and they have done it before, and they know the tactics very, very, very well. Museveni, that commission was its infancy, and I believe John Nassar was one of those people who were involved in the commission, and some have passed on, but Museveni refused to fund that commission because the commission was uncovering a lot of things Museveni did himself, and his from NASA agents, they were finding out that yes, things were coming out, and Museveni decided not to fund that commission. Eventually, I think also that was part of that investigative commission. Eventually, that commission was funded by Ford Corporation, not Ford Motors, but Ford. Those who remember President Gerald Ford, they gave over $90,000, and this was in 1986-87, and the commission was able to complete its investigation. The commission report produced the report, and the report was handed to the government of Uganda. And very, very few people who know that such a commission ever took place. The report was never given to the public. The information was kept secret, and Museveni completely put that report under the carpet, as he usually does. There is no way that a Truth and Reconciliation Commission can be formed at the present time when Museveni is still the president of Uganda, because it's going to incriminate him. It's going to incriminate him, and because of that, it will never see the light of day. Before I conclude, Museveni himself is very, 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 very much scared of Uganda uniting. Let me tell you, for your listeners, Uganda is losing a lot of people going in diaspora, going outside of the country, going to exile. And this has taken Museveni by surprise. And he was asking, why are these groups joining forces? Why are they joining together? People from the central joining the north, people from the east. Why are they joining? And mainly because people in diaspora, we are doing that. And this has caused a lot of problems from Museveni, because he said, I'm very much concerned, and is trying to do whatever he could to break up the unity that we people in the diaspora have demonstrated. I thank a lot our fellow Ugandans who have taken that step to see through Museveni's divide and rule, to see through that without unity we will never go anywhere. We need to unite, and this is the only way we are going to defeat Museveni. As we said yesterday on the program, Museveni's AK-47, his jet fighters, can keep him in power. The only thing that Museveni is afraid is people who are outside the country, and they are determined to unite. Unity, I cannot emphasize enough. We need to unite. We need one soul, one body to go and liberate our nation. Thank you so much, Ms. Brenda. I thank you, Voice of Uganda Radio. I'll hang up and continue to listen.
Thank you so much for your call, Musana. Professor, I'm going to let you comment on that, and especially the part on corruption in the commission. How do we assure the Ugandan people that that will not happen again? Go ahead and comment, Professor.
Well, I'm glad the caller has raised a very important issue. And I think what he was referring to was the Commission of Inquiry into Violations of Human Rights, which was set up in 1986, was chaired by the late Justice Arthur Oda. And I think it issued its report after investigating these violations in 1994. Now, this type of commission is different from what we are talking about. The commission, in fact, made some recommendations and set some information to the DPPs, the Director of Public Prosecution. They gave them information on people who could be further investigated. One of the problems with this commission was that it did not have all the powers that are necessary and essential to execute this type of investigation we are talking about. This commission, the caller is talking about, could only make recommendations to the DPP to take action, and the DPP obviously decided not to take action to prosecute various people who had where evidence pointed that they had violated, committed certain crimes involving violation of human rights. So, yeah, the type of commission we are talking about is like the one in South Africa, the one that can hold hearings, one where you appear, for example, if you want to get amnesty, you come before the commission, you disclose all the facts that are related to the allegations against you, and then the commission makes a decision whether to grant you amnesty or not to grant you amnesty, depending on the interpretation of the law and the facts found. So that is different. And in addition to that, this commission will have power to make sure that the violators of or people who committed war crimes are punished and according to the law. One of the reasons why some people objected to truth commissions is that because they open political wounds and they stand in the way of reconciliation of the nation, and because once you investigate people and you find that they committed crimes, then it means that those who committed crimes will be punished, and that is they argue, that's their argument, that prevents national unity and reconciliation. I'm of a different opinion. So we will make sure that the type of Truth and Reconciliation Commission, sometimes it could be called justice, truth and reconciliation. If the element of justice is there, then it will make sure that those who committed crimes are actually prosecuted and punished. Yes, it is true, as the caller pointed out, that the commission of inquiry that was done, and it spent almost 7 years, on these inquiries. It really wrote a report whose only use was to gather dust and not to be implemented. Now, to go back to the issue that you raised before, which I think is very important, torture in prisons. There is information showing that prisoners are starved, that they are not given sufficient food. That is not acceptable. That's inhumane. And when prison officers do that, they are committing a crime. They are in charge with these people. Once you arrest somebody and you put them in a prison, there are certain standards of treatment which is expected. And the other aspect is starvation, is torture. Torture is prohibited both both under international law and the Constitution of Uganda. And also, Uganda is now a party to the Convention Against Torture. It's part of the laws of Uganda. The Convention Against Torture has been enacted or domesticated into the laws of Uganda. Therefore, it is a valid law, and if anybody, a prison officer, is proved to have tortured any prisoner, they are subject to punishment. And the good thing about this new law is that you can sue the officer yourself directly without suing the government. And that officer can be sued for compensation for all the suffering that you endured during the process of torture. So the laws are there. Of course, they are not implemented. And our purpose is, of course, to change that kind of a situation and make sure that the laws that are on the books are effectively implemented.
Yes, and when you talk about fear of the Ugandan people in moving forward with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, what will be the role of those of us in the diaspora in the new Uganda? Because you're talking about people who have been tortured and who have lived without a voice for many, many years. And now, all of a sudden, you're going to open up the floodgates and tell them it's okay to talk, it's okay to share. We're here to make you whole again. We're here to bring justice back to the country. This is going to take the work of all of us in the diaspora to love on and encourage the Ugandans at the grassroots level, especially, to move forward and to trust again. What do you have to say on that, Professor?
Well, there are two words here which we have to use and explain: liberation and education. Liberation, I think you quoted Professor Ami Omar Otuno talking about liberation in South Africa. Well, this is also a process of liberation. In this case, we are liberating the minds of the people. The people have to change. They have to appreciate that they have human rights, and these human rights are protected by law. And if the law is violated, they have a recourse and they are entitled to a remedy under the law. So, but before you do that, that liberation is fighting the apathy of the people, fighting their pathological fear of the state, and assuring them that it is in their interests to confront the regime. In South Africa, if people did not start confronting the regime after the Sharpeville massacre, the change would not have come. Even South Africans too were like Ugandans. They feared the regime, but by then, after the Soweto rebellion of the students, the people gradually changed their mind. By 1983, when the Democratic Union, the big organization, was formed, people were changing. Those who had fear had less fear than before, and so the process you bring about political changes by changing the people. The word education. Education is important because people have to understand that they are human beings, and by virtue of their humanity, they are entitled to certain human rights, protection of their human rights. And once they understand that, they are not going to sit down and allow the government to abuse their rights and do whatever any authoritarian regime does. So that we have a job to do, and that has political education. And I'm glad that I'm now speaking on the Voice of Uganda radio. Hopefully some Ugandans within Uganda are listening, and they probably for the first time know that they have these rights. And I think that's the way to go. I know it is not a quick process, but it is a process that has to be done. If you are going to liberate people, you have to educate them first.
Yeah, so honestly, we can honestly say now from some of the comments that you made that a liberation has already started. And that is going to be one of the first steps to many steps to get into where we need to be in a new Uganda with these commissions forming.
Absolutely, yes. I agree with that. And so the task is enormous, but it has to be done. Well, the Chinese say a journey of 1,000 miles begins with one
step. Yes, they do.
Yeah, and when they talked about 1,000 miles, and I believe this was in the BCs, so they were talking about walking on foot for 1,000 miles. So now we have to go through the same process, and it is the determination. Some of us, we are determined that something has to be done, and once the determination is there, I don't think, as they say, faith can move mountains.
Yes, they do. And with that, I'm going to thank you so very much, Professor, for being a part of this first hour of the program. Let me just say, because of your legal expertise, because of your diligent research, not only to educate us, but to educate the people of Uganda, your portfolio speaks volumes of it for itself as a man that we need to pay attention to and we need to listen to as we continue to gather ourselves and move forward into a new Uganda. I knew it was going to be very, very important for Freedom at Hand for us to start painting the picture of the legalities, to show the people the direction in which we're heading, to show the people the direction in which we're moving forward to in liberating and educating the Ugandan public, whether you're in the diaspora or whether you're inside of the country. And we appreciate you so much, Professor, for all that you bring on board in helping us. The professor will also be joining me for the first hour next Sunday, where we will talk about legal recourse for land and property. Professor, that's going to be a huge one.
I know, and I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, that's going to be a huge one. And I think you have opened our eyes to so many things here right now with the legal recourse here for the Truth Commission, and at a level which I think we can all understand and take hold of and realize that these laws and these rights are given to the Ugandan people through their constitution. We just have to help them and educate them in the direction in which we would have them go. Would you like to say anything in closing, Professor, before we go on break?
Well, I think you've already said it. I don't have much to say except to assure the people that our determination is the result of our suffering, and our suffering cannot continue without an end. Therefore, we are determined to do everything we can to bring about a liberation of Uganda and democratizing our country.
Yes. Well, I thank you so much, and I know you'll still be listening to the other half, the next hour of the program. We're going to take a break here. If you want to call in and be a part of the conversation, you can. If something you have to address goes to the professor, I'm sure he won't have a problem calling back in if it's something he needs to answer for you. We're going to take a break here, and I'll be back with my host, Miss Dorothy, and the Honorable Zoe Bakoko, where we will debate and talk a little more in depth on the issues that the professor just shared with us. We're going to take a break. You're listening to Freedom at Hand here on Voice Uganda Radio. We'll be right back.
When I get older, I will be stronger. They'll call me freedom, just like a waving flag. Born to a throne, stronger than Rome, but violent prone, poor people's zone. But it's my home, all I have known, where I got grown. Streets we would roam, out of the darkness I came the farthest, among the hardest. Survival, learn from these streets, it can be bleak, except no defeat. Surrender, retreat, fighting to eat, and we wondering when we'll be free. So we patiently wait for that fateful day. It's not far away, but for now we say, when I get older, I will be stronger. They'll call me freedom, just like a waving flag. And then it goes back, and then it goes back, and then it goes back, and then it goes. When I get older, I will be stronger. They'll call me freedom, just like a waving flag. And then it goes back, and then it goes back, and then it goes back. Oh. So many wars, settling scores, bringing us promises, leaving us poor. I heard them say, love is the way, love is the answer. That's what they say, but look how they treat us, make us believers. We fight their battles, then they deceive us, try to control us. They couldn't hold us, cause we just move forward like buffalo soldiers, fighting to eat, and we when we'll be free. So we patiently wait for that fateful day. It's not far away, but for now we say, when I get older, I will be stronger. They'll call me freedom, just like a waving flag. And then it goes back, and then it goes back, and then it goes back, and then it goes. When I get older, I will be stronger. They'll call me freedom, just like a waving flag. And then it goes back, and then it goes back, and then it goes back. And everybody will be singing it, and you and I will be singing it, and we all will be singing it. Oh, 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 oh. When I get older, I will be stronger. They'll call me freedom, just like a waving flag. And then it goes back, and then it goes back, and then it goes back, and then it goes. When I get older, I will be stronger. They'll call me freedom, just like a waving flag. And then it goes back, and then it goes back, and then it goes back. Oh, when I get older, say when I get older, when I get older, just like a waving flag, just like a waving flag, just like a waving flag, just like a waving flag. When I get older, I will be stronger. They'll call me freedom, just like a waving flag. Born to a throne, stronger than Rome, but violent prone, poor people's zone. But it's my home, all I have known, where I got grown. Streets we would roam, out of the darkness I came the farthest, among the hardest. Survival, learn from these streets, it can be bleak. Accept no defeat, surrender, retreat. So we're struggling, fighting to eat, and we wondering when we'll be free.
Hello, and thank you so much for joining us for the second hour here at Freedom at Hand here on Voice Uganda Radio. What an honor. If for any reason other than educating the public, I think that Professor Mubiru did such a beautiful job really on helping us understand and engage in conversation in a way in which we haven't been able to before. We have talked so much about unity and the importance of unity. As organizations start to come together and start to form and start to unite and become bigger and bigger, we are going to have our challenges that we're going to have to face within ourselves. But we have to do it. We have to do it because in uniting, it is the only way in which we get all the people of Uganda on board. I love the fact that we're becoming the voices of Uganda Radio and that we're implementing more programs to reach out to more people, to bring more people on board and help them to understand the struggle and what's going on. Let me, I see that the Honorable Zoe Bakoko has come on in. Good morning, Zoe. Come on in and say hello and introduce yourself to the public this morning, and we'll get on with the program.
Yeah, good morning, Ms. Brenda. Good morning, all the listeners. As always, I just feel humbled to be here with you. And I was listening to our leader, Professor Mubiru, this morning, and I was just like, how lucky can the Ugandans be? And with a leader like Professor Mubiru, who is actually in our coordinating council, he heads the policy, research, and legal department. And you can just see how he talks. He has all the knowledge at his fingertips. And we are just so blessed to have leaders like this. And that's what Uganda needs in the new Uganda. And so I am very, very honored to be again speaking to you and sharing and learning from all of you Ugandans. And I see a lot of hope in the new Uganda with leaders like Professor Mubiru and Dr. Mukasa and Professor Amiyomara Otuno and, Miss Brenda, all of us, Miss Dorothy. I'm just so happy and we are blessed.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we are. And if for nothing else, to really start the liberation and the education of the Ugandan people, I think it's where our hearts are, because the more we get into the homes and the airways of the Ugandan people, we show them hope for a new Uganda. That's why I felt it was so important to have these morning series with over the next 5 weeks with Professor Mubiru, so that he can explain things on a level where we can understand it, we can embrace it, we can see it happening, and we can move forward. Because, Zoe, comment on this if you will. I think that we have to continue the work with those in the diaspora as well as those who are inside of the country to give them a foundation, educating and liberating them in order to help them to move forward as well. What is your comment on that?
Miss Brenda, we all love Uganda equally, whether you are inside Uganda or you are in the diaspora. And, Uganda is our country. It's big enough for all of us. And I believe that it is also our responsibility as Ugandans to ensure that we have freedom in our country, that we have independence in our country, and that we live in this country without fear, because it is our country, and that we also have a responsibility to develop it, because what we leave for our children and our grandchildren depends on what we do at this point in time. And so, for me, whether inside Uganda or outside Uganda, it's our role to ensure that we have a Uganda that is habitable. I mean, even just for example, take a home of a family. Yeah? The family always tries to work so hard to ensure that they have a home which is comfortable for all the inhabitants, the children, the father, the mother. And they try to make sure that the children receive education. They try to make sure the children are healthy, and if one of them is sick, gets health care, and that the parents are in harmony. Of course, there's always going to be some, you agree to disagree or disagree to agree on some issues, but it should not bring out a war. And so that is what we should do as Ugandans. Just role model a family. Because every family, whether you like it or not, Miss Brenda, will have some problems. But we should try and make it as comfortable as possible so that these children grow up into responsible citizens. And that is what the whole Uganda is all about. And each and every one of us as citizens has a role to play, not to destroy that country like it is being destroyed by Museveni and the NRM government.
Yeah, and the importance of the movement forward, the importance of liberation and education, the importance of having a truth commission is for exactly the purpose in which you just stated. No member of any family is important than the whole structure of the family, and I agree with that. You know, comment on this. The professor in his closing there talked about the quote, a journey of 1,000 miles starts with one step. I think a lot of times people in the very beginning, a few years back when we started Voice Uganda Radio, where are we going? What are we doing? How are we coming together? How are we going to make this happen? What are you guys doing? Transparency, all of these things that people were asking. Those don't seem to be the questions anymore that we're starting to get, because I think each and every week on these radio shows, as we implement and bring new people on board, the conversations that we're starting to have, I think the people have started to make that first step on the journey of 1,000 steps. Go comment on that for me, if you will.
Absolutely. The Chinese say a journey of 1,000 miles starts with one step. The Lubara say that, you know, that that, you know, when you go to the garden early in the morning and you have like an acre or more to dig, or a quarter acre, and you look at this garden, and they said, you know, eyes, literally translating it, that people's eyes are cowards, because you look at this and say, will I really finish this garden? It's too huge. I don't think I can do it. But once you put the hoe in on the ground and you start digging, before you know it, it is mid-morning, and your wife is bringing you some porridge to give you some strength with water, and you have already dug more than half of that garden. And then you're like, oh, I can do it. And so it is really the determination. It is coming together and having the faith and saying and believing in ourselves and saying that we can do it. And we have made a huge steps. Like you said before, the discussions were, what are you doing? How will you do it? What's going to happen? How sure are you that this could happen? But that how sure are you this could happen is now gone. People are now coming together and saying, I think we can do this. And when you see FUF and FADU coming together to sign a coalition partnership, Miss Brenda, that is huge. That is huge. And just like one of the callers, Musana, said, that Museveni is panicking. He's scared because people are coming together and people understand. It's not only in the diaspora alone, even back home. Although he is putting in why do you think Museveni is putting all these laws? Like the POMA law, Public Order Management Act. Why is he putting those laws in place? He's putting those laws in place to try and restrict, because he's panicking. He knows that people are coming together. And so people need not to lose their faith, and they just need to have their determination. If everything was as comfortable as he thinks, he wouldn't put these laws in place to restrict people's movements and people discussing and debating and that is the reason why he's putting those laws in place. And that should be the reason why Ugandans should even be more determined to move forward with this process and making sure that they liberate their country.
Yes, because one of the things we know for sure is freedom in any aspect is not paid with comfort. There's a lot of bumps and there's a lot of discomfort along the way. I felt the need to share with the professor this morning, Professor Mubiru, about the article that Professor Otunu wrote in Black Star News about comparing a lot of what's going on in Uganda to a lot of what the South Africans had to go through and how they had to find their way back to wholeness. I think, and you can comment on this, we have to start giving comparisons so people can see the outcome. I think the comparisons that we give have nothing to do with reflecting and saying this is what we should do, this is how we should be, but it's to see what happened in order to get the end result that we all like today. But it did not come without a lot of discomfort and a lot of hardship. Comment on that for me, if you would, Zoe, because it's very important for us in the education and the liberating to show people paths that were taken and the outcome of those paths that they chose to take.
Miss Brenda, people need to understand. They need to understand why they want to be liberated. And I believe that they already know that everything is really squeezing them. Ugandans know that the poverty is biting. And they know that there could be no poverty if they had a government which was not stealing all the funds, which is supposed to be for their development programs. A government which has collapsed the agricultural sector, a government which has deliberately collapsed the education sector. They have brought all these programs and they have not implemented them effectively. Why? Because every time you have people who want to dip their fingers into the national coffers. And so this has made it so difficult. The population is suffocating. And trust me, when people are suffocating, they will try and pop the lid so that they can get some air. And they will try and get an outlet through which they should get some air into their lungs. And if they can't, they will of course die. And I think Ugandans have reached that point where they want to pop that lid open. And the government knows it. And it's trying to tighten its noose. But that noose is not around the necks of Ugandans. It's actually going now the other way. The noose is being tightened on the government's neck. And the government is the one which is going to collapse and suffocate. Because the people are going to get up and demand for their rights. They are going to demand for accountability. They are going to demand for proper leadership. And so with this kind of environment, which is becoming so fertile for change, I think there now comes the role of the actors, the people who are going to take the leadership role to ensure that they are speaking to the population. They are speaking among themselves. They are speaking with the other allies so that something positive, which is change, is going to happen. And Museveni is aware of this. Him and his cronies are trying their best to see how they can get a soft landing. A few weeks ago, I was speaking to somebody who was telling me that, trust me, Miss Zoe, what is happening in Uganda, even the people within NRM understand it. They are looking for a soft landing. And so they have identified one politician and one other person in the military. They think those two people could be the soft landing outcome for them, because they have amassed so much wealth. They have, which of course they have stolen, and now they think that they should have a soft landing, identify one of their own if Museveni has to go, so that they can continue to steal and amaze and continue with the status quo. And so the panic is all around. And the thing is, we want a government which is not going to steal from people. We want a government which is going to free people. We want a government which is going to provide proper leadership. We want a government which gives Ugandans the liberty to govern themselves and get involved in their democracy process. And so we are not going to take this soft landing which they think they want to camouflage and just because
where has been the soft landing for the Ugandan people? Let me say this, and it's exactly what Professor Mubiru was talking about with corruption there in the country. Mm-hmm. Let me say this. We already know that the American government listens to Voice Uganda Radio. and has interpreters for some of the other programs that come on. We already know that the Ugandan government listens to Voice Uganda Radio. And we, as well as those two, I'm sure that the government in the UK is going to start to get on board and make this a part of their listening as well. Yeah, because their people. What is happening is the liberation that Professor Mubiru just talked about. There is a liberation happening in the United States of America on these programs, as well as UK, as well as in Uganda. That people are paying attention because they understand and know the threat. Because like Professor said, Musana, who called in, and you just said, when the people start to form a unity and start to come together and listen to each other for the unity of one to move forward, it becomes a huge, huge threat. And we already know that the Ugandan government is panicking and trying to figure this all out. Now, you were just talking about some of the MPs and some of the others that are in government there in the NRM looking for people to give them a soft fall. But a truth commission, you know, like Professor said, and we can talk about this, the professor said it, not everybody in the NRM is bad. But a lot of the NRM people are. That's why these truth commissions are going to be set up, so that the truth comes out, so that the people make the decisions as to how to move forward or how to handle this. When a comment like that is made, because you just talked about a soft landing, how do you feel that this will help in the Truth Commission? And do you think that this is a voice in the ears of the members of Parliament now to say, look, this is coming. The inevitable is coming. There is going to be a new Uganda. It will be reformed, and we're going to move forward on behalf of the Ugandan people. Because 36 million people demand it and want it. What do you think that this is telling them? And do you feel that we're putting the fear on them and taking it off of the Ugandan people to a certain degree and putting it back on the people who have inflicted this fear for so long? Comment on that, if you
Absolutely. Now the hunter is being hunted.
Yes.
The hunter is becoming hunted because they thought that they would push all this fear and on the Ugandan people. And I think you remember Professor Mubiru talking about a commission of inquiry which was instituted by the Museveni government when they came into power in 1986 and 87. And this commission of inquiry was not a fact-finding commission. Honestly, Ms. Brenda, this was what the Lugara call a buttock-searching commission, which was victimizing certain people. It was put in a situation where there would be certain people who would be victimized and brutalized, intimidated, in such a way that it would create fear among the people, so that everybody, when you are called in front of the commission, you start to panic because you have been identified as one of those who abused. But a fact-finding commission, a truth and reconciliation commission, is supposed to be a commission that the people should feel free to go to talk to, whether you have abused human rights of other Ugandans or not, or you have been a victim or not. People should be able to go and not coached to go and say what they are supposed to say. But people should go and talk freely about what happened to them. Professor was talking about the war in Luero. The war in Luero has been a cash cow since Prime Minister Samson Kiseka. It's a cash cow for the NRM government. It has not been put in place so that Lueroans and their conditions, their cows which were stolen, the deaths, the destruction is actually addressed. It has not been put in place for that. And neither is the amnesty for northern Uganda, where the war took over 20 years, where so many people have been killed. And recently you have heard where Ugandans from northern Uganda, one part are saying they want, I think the compensation is in trillions.
Wow.
And the NRM government is not going to pay that because they spend money worth more than trillions on those processes, and the money went into other people's pockets and stashed abroad. or in the high-rising buildings and bungalows you have seen built in Kampala and in other parts of the country. And so the real thing which was supposed to happen, listen to these people without intimidation, address the anomalies and injustices, the human rights abuses, create a process for reparation and compensation, the healing and the closure, so that you bring the Ugandans together and say, never again can we have this situation happen in our country. I think we will move forward. The issues have been addressed. People who were hurt have been compensated. People who were abused have found a way of getting healed and get a closure. And now they say, we have to move forward. That cannot happen unless you have a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which is set on ethical and ethical values, not just a corruption committee which comes and then it is talking to people in pieces. It is giving amnesty. The things like the iron sheets and etc., which are supposed to be used for resettling these poor people, is stolen from them. High food. What has been happening in Uganda is not a true Truth and Reconciliation Committee. Even the amnesty which they are giving is just giving with one hand and taking away their power, which is supposed to be the resources to resettle these people, taking it away from them. And so really, how can you talk about... Go ahead, Miss Brenda.
Well, when you talk about that, given with one hand and taken with the other, the power that people need to move forward and say that they're doing good is being abused at every level. And that is why it's important when the two came on the program talking about the federalist system, taking the power away from the chair. Yet you still have people who feel like if they don't have power and control, they feel useless, or they feel like it's something that they need to fight for. But if you're fighting on behalf of the Ugandan people, the power needs to go to the people. And I think somehow, we got to get that back in the minds of Ugandans, whether you're in the diaspora or in Uganda or in the government. Power has to be returned to the people. We should never give power to anyone to rule us other than giving the people the power back by their vote or by whatever means. One of the things I have to say to you, and I want you to comment on that, when you talk to me and when you talk on this program about the wealth that's in Uganda, the high-rises that they're building, the homes that they have, all of these things that they're putting together, when we go in with the Truth Commission, I have a feeling that a lot of those properties are going to belong to the Ugandan people. So I want to thank those people. I want to thank those people for building our clinics, for building our hospitals, for building our shelters for the homeless children. Because when those properties are taken back because of illegal dealing, which me and the professor are going to talk about, and you'll come on to elaborate in the last hour, land and property, a lot of what's going on there now, it will turn over to the hands of the Ugandan people. So they are structuring and building a lot of what we will need in the new Uganda. And we will just take over those properties why do you have so many homeless children living on the streets of Kampala, and these people are building enormous wealth and not even thinking about these children and what is right for them? Because when you talk about building Truth and Reconciliation Commissions, who will speak on behalf of the Ugandan children? Who will speak and comment on that? Who will speak on the behalf of all of these homeless children that are on the street, that the government, the Human Rights Commission, no one has done anything to see fit to get these children into homes, shelters, school, or whatever? Speak on that, if you will, because they cannot be the victims that are left behind in these conversations that have to be had in a new Uganda.
Ms. Brenda, I think the process through which this education and sensitization can be carried, it will involve everybody. You have to have the civic organizations, the non-governmental organizations who are going to engage the government. You have to have the communities who are going to demand for accountability. We cannot afford to have our children on the streets. These children have to be resettled. back in their communities or in some homes, which is going to provide them decent homes, which is going to help them to grow up into decent adults. In this country, I was hearing somewhere, and I think it was in Delaware, where the mayor of the city what had he been? He was a homeless person. And he was he was in one of these homes like Kampringisa in Uganda, or Naguru remand home. He was in a remand home, and he did a paper where he wrote an article where he showed his room in that remand home, and now he's the mayor of the city. Can you just imagine this? Can you just think through this, that those children you are throwing on the streets, there are those children who are in the remand homes, who are being tortured, who are being treated as if they are not human beings. Can you even fathom that one of those kids could become a president in Uganda, could be a mayor, could be a governor? Can you even fathom that? And when you look at this, you're like, oh my God, every human being, if they have the opportunity and the right opportunity, if they are given a favorable environment to thrive in, the sky is the limit. That human being can become anybody in that country. And why is it that the Ugandan children are being abandoned in the streets? The government should take responsibility. The community should take responsibility. A child should be everybody's child. I remember also again a movie which I watched, and I think the movie was shot out of Zambia or one of the South African countries. It was about HIV/AIDS. This young kid whose parents died, there were 3 of them, 2 boys and 1 girl, and the youngest was a boy. And when their parents died of HIV/AIDS, the community, the neighbors, everybody was just scrambling, taking away these children's property, just grabbing and leaving these children what you call paupers and with nothing. And eventually the girl was going around trying to look for food. The son, the bigger boy, went to the city thinking he could go work in the city, joined these street children and drugs and everything, while the girl was almost going into prostitution. And this little boy was left alone in the house with a candle. What happened? The candle caught fire on a curtain and the house burned, and this poor kid died. And what did that show? That if everybody else had not been bent on grabbing property, abandoning these children, someone had just extended a hand and took this child and put them in their home, this child would not have died. If these children had been given a home, regardless, they wouldn't have gone into all these trades where the brother ended up using drugs and every of these things will come to your doorstep unless you change the way you think, unless you change the way you do things, because that kid was everybody's child. That kid was everyone's child. And if everyone in the village had taken a step, just one step, to try and help that kid would not have burned in that fire. And I think, go ahead, Ms.
Yeah,
Brenda.
because one of the things we have to get the Ugandan people back to is the Good Samaritan, loving other people, caring for other people. And I think the government has turned the people against each other to trust to be able to move forward. And we got to get that back to the Ugandan people. Let me just share this and you can comment on this. Because last week we talked about the sad story of the man who had to take his wife to the hospital in a wheelbarrow. Once he got her there, they would not see his wife. The end of that story was a sad one because his wife died and so did the child. This is a man who loved this woman. If he put her in a wheelbarrow and was willing to take her the miles to the hospital that he needed to go to get her there, only not to be seen because there was no monies and no funds in order for the doctor to treat her. Let's put this same doctor in a different scenario. Let's say this man is on his way to the hospital. This doctor is walking past him on his way home. He stops the man to say, what is the problem? He says, my wife, she's having a baby. I need to get her to the hospital. This doctor said, let me see what's going on with her. Maybe on the side of the road, he delivers the baby. it has a completely different ending to the story. That is the Good Samaritan side of where we need to get Ugandans back to. The greed in the country to move forward, to try to make a living and to try to make a life for your family has turned us into unrecognizable people. To where you don't have a simple, you don't have a sympathetic. Yeah, go ahead.
Why do you think Ugandans have trust issues?
Yes.
Ugandans have trust problems. Ugandans have trust issues because this government has created Ugandans to spy on each other. It has brought a situation where there are other people, just like we said, Luero became a cash cow. And for those people who were getting the money, they were getting it and as their grocery check. Meanwhile, they are accusing other people. And there are other people who do this. They have actually become experts in creating issues of trust among Ugandans. And Ugandans have to come together, Miss Brenda, and put these trust issues aside if they are going to liberate their country. Without doing that, coming together and beginning to cross that bridge of trust, which many Ugandans don't have now. It's not just the fear. The fear has graduated into trust. So there's this lack of trust among Ugandans. And there are some people who deliberately are put in these positions to bang heads and cause this problem. Let me give you an example. Many years ago in northern Uganda, in Arua, for example, West Nile, we had a story that the president's brother was going to overthrow the president, and that the president was even making verbal statements to say that his kid brother Salim Saleh was drinking. They were not going to agree on each other. He doesn't like him anymore. And all these bubbles were going in the media waves and everywhere people were hearing them. Trust me, this was what we call a camouflage. The man went out and the people in West Nile, those who were willing to join him, came out and joined. What happened in the end? All that was done to try and see how much opposition this man had, and then how they could, deal with that problem. And by the time people knew what was going on, people were being arrested for wanting to fight Museveni's government, blah, blah, blah. And we have seen this coming in different colors, whether yellow, green, black, blue. We have seen it being repeated many times. We have seen people who have been planted in opposition to pretend that the opposition, and they keep on making sure that the opposition doesn't come together. We have seen people within government who come under very unclear circumstances and try to get out and break and sow seeds of disunity and discord in the diaspora. I remember one time a list was issued on Radio Katue. And when that list came out on who was actually on the government's check outside there spying on people, the entire unity among the diaspora broke down. So Ugandans, we should begin to retrace our steps. Why is this happening? And how does it help us who want to free Uganda, who want independence in Uganda? It does not, because it actually helps the dictator to thrive, because that way we remain divided. And so time has come for Ugandans to begin to look and say, really, the role I'm playing in this process, is it helping my brothers and sisters to get us back into Uganda and go into the new Uganda, or is the role I'm playing going to disintegrate that process?
Well, I think
trust issues are very critical.
They're very critical. And I think, too, when Professor Mubiru just said that we need to continue to look to our history, I think there was an underlining comment there, and it's exactly what you're saying right now. We've got to look back into our history to say what is happening and why do things continue to break down and continue to not move forward in a good and a positive way, especially those who live out in the diaspora. You're being educated, you're being taught in different communities for a reason. I believe that everyone that is out in the diaspora plays a huge role in the new Uganda. For the simple reason they understand democracy, they understand the way communication works, they understand the way unity works, they understand things on a different level, even though some of them are still in large Ugandan communities outside of Uganda, but they still understand a lot of things and have the freedoms that they can implement and help take back into Uganda. You know, you can comment on this, Zoe. I want to make a comment on this. If we go back to the Bible, in any form, whether you're Catholic, Baptist, Jehovah, whatever you are, it tells us as a part of the golden rules, love thy neighbor as thyself. If you really study that scripture in any religion that you practice or any form that you're in, loving thy neighbor as thyself, it calls you to put yourself in the place of that other person, to feel their emotions, to feel their heartache, to feel their struggle, to feel their pain. When you do that, you can no longer turn your back on that person, but it then leads you into a place of compassion. A compassion that you would not otherwise have because of the fact that you see yourself and you separate yourself from that individual. I think it's what's happening in Parliament in Uganda. Those people have separated themselves from the suffering of the people, and they have put themselves in another category of the people, the have and the have-nots, so to speak. And within that, you have to understand that it won't work in any way or whatsoever. So when we say love thy neighbor as thyself, what do you want to see the Ugandan people do, and how do you want to see them rise up to that?
Miss Brenda, I want to see Ugandans supporting each other, holding each other, understanding our common good, our strengths, and knowing the challenges that we have ahead and how we can deal with these challenges to make our country a comfortable country for us. And just like I said earlier on, you know, the country is like a family unit. If you have a family unit, you want a home or a household which is comfortable for the family, and you know, at all levels, because what the father's needs are different from the children's needs. The wife's needs are different from the father's needs. But the issue of comfort, respect, and you know, freedom, and how democratically that household is governed should be basic. It should be basic. There should be no abuses in any home, and you know that. And children should be given all their basic rights: the food, the clothing, the housing, the education, the health. They should be given that so that they can grow up into the next generation of leaders in that country. Because if the parents don't provide that environment for the children, then the children are not going to be able to grow into productive citizens. And they could end up on the streets. They could be using drugs. They could become all sorts of people. And then we also need to cultivate a culture of trust, respect among our people. Because today in Uganda, when a child is growing and going through university and coming out, the child wants to get a job. He sees one other person who went in URA or something, and within a short time, this person is driving one of the best cars, is probably having a beautiful bungalow and all this, and everybody's like, how did they get that? That's why you now see everybody thinks the money is in Parliament. That is where everybody wants to go. Parliament is right now with the Museveni government. Parliament has close to 350 people. And you have 36 million people in Uganda. Everybody cannot be in Parliament. People have to be in different places and play their different roles in how to make that country viable and comfortable for everybody. Parliament has a role in making the laws, doing the checks and balances on government to see if the monies which the cabinet is allocating to these different programs, they are supposed to debate it, allocate these budgets, and ensure that the money is spent in these areas. You have the judiciary who are supposed to look at the legal. You had Professor Mubiru How blessed are we going to be in the new Uganda with a leader like Professor Mubiru, who understands the legal issues of a country? And we are so blessed now, as in our coordinating council, to have him as our policy, research, and legal affairs holding that portfolio, because he gives you the guidance. He explains it so eloquently, and you understand it. And so Ugandans need those roles to be performed properly. We will have challenges. Every home, as I said earlier, in a home which looks to be the best, they have their own challenges. And the issue is, how do you deal with your challenges so that they don't become huge problems to break the family? These are the things that Ugandans need.
Yeah, and these are the things that when we explain on this program with Professor being on for the first hour, Truth Commission brings these things out. One of the things that the professor said, and he said it profoundly, and I believe it to be true, that one of the things that the Truth Commission brings about is unity. It brings about unity, I believe, for a lot of the things that Zoe has been sharing, a lot of things I've said, and some of the things the professor said earlier on being on the show. When you feel connected to other individuals, when you feel connected to other human beings, and you feel like you're connected for the common cause, it takes you a long, long way. When a Truth Commission comes in and set up and is formed, because of all the liberating and the educating of the people like today, and for all of those who are listening and being a part of it, you welcome it because it's familiar. We've talked about it. We've embraced it. We've helped you to understand it. We've shown you the path. We're given a face. We're given a face to the new Uganda. So when people see that face, they'll recognize it and say, oh, this is a friendly face. This is okay. Because little by little, from the grassroots up, we have to start educating and bringing the Ugandan people together for unity, for one cause and one purpose. And I think when the professor said liberation and education, that is what we're doing. Even to the things that you're talking about, Zoe, responding as it being a family unit, because we understand and we know the way family units work. We want all the Ugandan people, those in the diaspora who are refugees, those who are inside the country. We have to start thinking of ourselves as a collective family, meaning you care for that person. You watch out for that person's back. You don't ridicule or do hurtful things to bring down the family structure, but you build the family structure. I think until Ugandans start to really, really take on that concept that we are one, whether you're from the north, the south, the east, the west, or central. We hurt for the Acholis, we hurt for the Bugandas, we hurt for everyone equally, because in this struggle, everyone has lost something. Everyone is in pain and everyone is being tortured to a certain degree. No one person is better than any other person. And we can't look at this as a my family opposed to your family, what I'm going through opposed to what you're going through. We have to take collectively the hurt of the Ugandan people on our shoulders as a whole. Because if we do it that way, it moves us farther, faster. If you put the weight of the Ugandan people on the shoulders of one or two people, you're going to eventually break those people down. Therefore, you break down the movement forward. But if we all take this on our shoulders to say, where can I help? Where do I fit in? What can I do? How do I become a part of the new Uganda? We make a huge impact, not only in our own communities, but within the world. Because when I say that America is listening to this program, the Ugandans have people listening to these programs. UK as well is on board, from what Zoe is sharing, and have people listening in on board. The country and the world are starting to listen. Do we allow our voices to go in silence, or do we continue to move forward on behalf of the Ugandan people? The riots in Soweto with the youth, those riots opened doors into that country that would not have been opened otherwise, for the world to see what was going on. Voice of Uganda Radio, through its programs, through the education, through the liberating of the people, I believe that we're opening doors in not only our communities, but in the world, that are helping people to see what is truly happening in Uganda, and that yes, those in the diaspora are saying enough is enough. We want to take back our country. We want to liberate our people. We want to bring it back to its golden years where it used to be before all of these things happened. And we want to make sure that this never, ever, ever happens again. Zoe, we've come down to the last 10 minutes of our program. So I am going to go ahead and give you some time here to make some closing statements. And I will come on after you're done and make a few more comments of my own. And then I will go ahead and close out the program. Go ahead, Zoe.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ms. Brenda. You know, when we are discussing these issues of the new Uganda and talking about the truth and the Reconciliation Commission, people are going to say, but Museveni has done that. There was a commission of inquiry. There has been amnesty granted to some people. There's been some compensation. Let me just say this. I think if those of us who heard Professor Mubiru very, very clearly, we know that a Truth and a Reconciliation Commission is supposed to be a fact-finding mission. And there's a huge difference between the Truth and the Reconciliation Commission that happened in South Africa and what happened in Uganda. What Museveni did cleverly, as he is always, is to pick a few pieces here and there and make it appear as if he was on that path to do a Truth and Reconciliation Commission and try to do a fact-finding, which was not the case. What they had was what you would call a victimization commission. In the inquiry, he also realized that, oh my God, the snail trail was going back to him because some of the atrocities had been committed by him and his Fonasa. And so when he realized these things were coming, the chickens were coming home to roost, he decided, I'm not going to fund this commission. So there were delays. The whole thing was bogged down. The energy and the heat and excitement about the Truth and the Reconciliation Commission, which he put in form of an inquiry, lost its strength and power. And so therefore he has done these things. He has done a small bit in Luero, he's done a Teso Commission, he's done it in northern Uganda, and he's done it in West Nile, and put people there to pretend that these commissions were going to provide amnesty, and the law has always had its failures in Parliament, and sometimes it expires and then they try and reenact it again and they extend the period for amnesty. And so it has been done in what you call a fire brigade way, where the whole thing, there's no systematic plan and process. A Truth and Reconciliation Commission, for me, means that Ugandans are going to have a fact-finding commission which is going to speak freely to people, and everybody should be able to come there without intimidation, without fear, without trust issues, and they should not be coached to go and tell the committee or commission what they want to hear for the purpose of trying to victimize certain people. No, because we want a free process where people will come and talk, where injustices, where anomalies, where human rights abuses will be addressed, where reparation and compensation will be affected, and affected properly without this business of you identify all the people who are the beneficiaries and they don't receive, even though the money has been allocated, and you don't know where the money has disappeared, and nobody asks the questions. And so we need this to be a healing process, which is going to bring unity in our country and closure for some people who still don't know what happened to their own people and why they had to suffer the way they suffered, why they were tortured. And so it is going to involve liberating and educating our people, liberating our minds, taking the fear away, and taking the trust issues away so that we can begin to live like Ugandans and giving the power back to the Ugandan people. So I thank you, Miss Brenda. I thank you, all the listeners. And I think today I go back and I'm going to step back and start reflecting on what each and every one of us, including myself, what will be my role in making sure that we achieve this in the new Uganda. I thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Zoe, for those words. Thank you so much to Professor Mubiru, who has opened the hearts and the minds of the Ugandan people today, who has given us a new way of looking at our lives forward. We need to continue to paint that picture. Freedom at Hand is here for that reason, to start to paint a picture in your minds of the direction in which we need to have. The professor did that very, very well and very, very profoundly, and I thank him so much. Remember that this is a 5-point series. He will be on again next Sunday, where we will talk about land and property and what the legal recourses are in that. That will be just about as lengthy and as involved as the Truth Commission here has been. Answers to questions is what everybody wants and what everybody wants to know. Too many people have gone missing. Too many people have been brutalized. Too many people have been hurt. People have been sold into slavery in other countries to work, think they're going there for jobs, and they've been purchased by these families and they're working outside of the country. We've got to find those people. Truth Commissions tells us what's going on. Where are these people? Where are the beloved Ugandan people who trusted in their country to take care of them and move them forward? And it has done nothing other than to cause heartache and pain for the Ugandan people. What are the facts? We want people to come forward, be able to talk about things from their heart, from a place of truth, so that we get to the bottom of everything. All of the hurt and the pain that has happened in the country connects us to other things. You would be amazed that someone who is in the far north may have information on someone who's in the central. That's why these commissions need to be put together, and that's why they need to be formed. Because there's bits and pieces of information all throughout the country that the Truth Commission, from what I understand Professor Mubiru talking about this morning, is like a puzzle. And we need to put that puzzle together one piece at a time. And no one person has all that information, nor does one region have all of that information. But together, collectively, all that information can be gathered, and we can get to the bottom of what has happened and how we start to make the people of Uganda whole again. Because, my fellow Ugandans, that's what it's all about in the end, is making the Ugandan people whole again, giving people a reason to live, for life, to love. When I wake up every morning here in the United States of America, I have great things to look forward to, and I have great things to embrace, and I have great people around me. I'm not going to be tortured that day. I'm not going to be thrown in jail that day. I'm not going to be lied upon, spit upon. I'm not going to be a dumping ground for torture and other atrocities to happen to me. We've got to give peace and tranquility back into the hearts of the Ugandan people. It's something that they don't have now and that they have not had for a long period of time. Yes, we are separating ourselves from the President Museve's regime. We are not going in to do a reconciliation according to the old ways. When Professor talks about history, and remember in our history tells us, look at our past and learn from it, and not let it be the direction of our future. It's the only way that we move forward. Like the professor so eloquently put, and me and Zoe have used it throughout the program, the journey of 100 miles starts with one step. We are making that one step. Even those of you who are listening to the program today and being actively involved in this, you're making that one step. Don't belittle anything that is happening. Don't belittle anything that you think you're not contributing, because I think we all contribute in our own ways each and every day. Please join me again next Sunday here on Freedom at Hand, where for the first hour, once again, we will have Professor Mubiru on. We will be doing the legal recourses for land and property, what has happened to the Ugandan people in that aspect, how we move them back forward, and how we make them whole again. I thank you so very much for being a part of our listening audience. Thank you so much for your participation. You have been listening to Freedom at Hand with the Honorable Zoe Bakoko and Miss Brenda here on Voice Uganda Radio. Have a great Sunday, and we'll talk to you again next week. God bless you until then, and God bless